Hi, my name is Joanna. I am the curator and also one of the artists in this show. I work mainly in painting and ceramics.
Hi, my name is Toye. My pronouns are they, them. I primarily work with materials that are low impact, but also mundane. So when you think about the amount of significance you can imbue in a mundane material, you can kind of, envision how far something can be stretched. So textiles, fabrics, things that have cultural weight, and things that you can manipulate yourself and naturally. That's kind of where I operate with my medium.
Hi, everybody. My name is Zaire McPhearson, and I work primarily, well, I guess I do a lot, from sculpture to graphic design, photography, and the show that's up here, quilting, a little bit of graphic design, oil painting, so a little bit of everything. I consider my work a love letter to Black womanhood, really telling the stories of Black women using sort of whatever medium speaks to me, depending on the stories that I'm trying to tell.
My name is Justin. I'm doing mixed media abstract expressionism. And I feel like the identity of my art comes from nostalgia, from everyday things that I see and do.
So what we're going to do is we're going to answer these questions here in the group setting since there's four of us. We're going to pick a little piece of paper out here, and whatever that paper tells us to do, whether someone else needs to answer the question or we answer it, that's kind of the flow we're going for. So who would like to be the first one? All right, Justin.
Pick someone to take.
All right. So pick one of those questions on those cards there.
Can you describe a moment where you felt your work directly challenged or disrupted a historical narrative or expectation? Toye.
I think having work that just comes from a daily habit of sewing, showing something that a lot of people don't give a lot of attention to, that may pass over, disqualify as craft, using a medium or trying an approach that a lot of times is associated with a specific gender. All of these things disrupt the expectation of a Black artist. But when you really get to the history, it's honestly a reconnection. There's so much cultural richness that is directly related to working with your hands. When you think about legacies of labor, when you think about not having provisions made for you and you having to do it yourself from the ground up. And there's a pride in that, but there's also making art to be beautiful just because. It's not always a reflection of what I've had to struggle with, but that can inform who I am, but it doesn't define my experience. So I think working in materials that cause people to kind of slow down and kind of re-engage with what that might look like, re-envisioned, is a way that it has dispelled expectation. So that's a long way to put that, but yeah.
That's good. Yeah, that's nice. We did it extra. Y'all answer. Look at that. What is one myth or stereotype you hope to dismantle through your art? Y'all want to answer first? You want to go first? Oh, okay, sure. Okay. Wait, do you have that? No. All right. I think it's a couple myths I would sort of like to dismantle throughout my art. I think as a Black artist, I think everybody thinks that you always have to make art about the downs of being a Black or brown person living in America. I think it always has to be for the negative side of things, and I think a lot of times you don't see sort of that positive side of that. I remember a time when I was in grad school and we had to work on thesis, and everybody over was thinking I would just make this artwork that had to do with like struggle, and I just was so tired of seeing artwork that was filled with struggle and no pain. I think as a Black person, there are struggles, of course. I mean, you can look through American history and see like the struggles of our people all throughout it, and even currently now. But I think it's another side to it, just to make art just about being Black. I think it's beauty in being a Black person and making art about that experience. So I really would like to make art that inspires, tell the story, and I think inside the story you're always going to have struggle, but to that struggle is always triumph. It's always overcoming that. So that is sort of what I would like to show throughout my art.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. But,
A way that I want my work to dismantle a myth would be to address this myth that there's a singular, kind of similar to what you said, Zaire, there's a singular expression of what the art is supposed to look like and what it's supposed to talk about. And just recognize that if I'm a Black artist and Black creative, whatever I create is Black art by default.
Justin?
Okay.
I want to say it's difficult expressing yourself. I just had experience of having to kind of work for somebody and create for them, being overlooked for their creative abilities and hiding the truth, trying to showcase your work, versus how you really want to express yourself. And that isn't always marketable or sellable to a client. So being able to, I want to say, reinvent what art looks like, to know that I can be seen in a different venue and nobody knows what the artwork looks like or who it comes from. And that representation, I don't think that matters. I think if someone looks at a piece of artwork, it should touch them either way. And race really shouldn't matter.
So I think the myth in my work that I want to dismantle is that as Black artists, all of our experiences are not monolithic. There's not one thing that we all have to focus on. And that's one of the reasons why I've brought us all together, because what our goals are, they kind of all align, and we all express that differently in the different mediums that we work in. And I think that is very inherent in breaking down those stereotypes and beliefs that, the only way that a Black artist can create art, or where they can create art from, is from the downtrodden storyline that we all been given. We all have our own personal experiences, whether it's with mental health, economic issues, things like that, or even just like creating art just to create art for art's sake. That's something that I want to have people come away from the show with, like, art from Black artists is art. It's not a slave mentality type thing that we all have to deal with. Like Justin said, when we create our work, race shouldn't matter. Our artwork should just be able to touch you in a way that you can relate to it, and that you come away with a different mindset or way of thinking. All right, so you all answer.
Ooh, do this one.
Awesome. How does your identity as an African American inform your practice? I'll go first. Y'all think about it.
Okay.
So my identity is kind of twofold. I identify as both Caribbean and, I guess, African American. It really just depends on where the boat drops you off. But I draw mostly on my Caribbean heritage, mainly because it's so colorful, and I like to incorporate a lot of color in my work. And I feel like using all these different colors, I'm able to express the type of mood I'm in, and then also bring the awareness to my heritage. And then on the other hand, as identifying as an African American, I'm also aware of the weight that comes with it, because there's also there's the slavery aspect, the stereotypes, and then there's also our triumphs and what we've been able to do since slave times. And also, it's just a lot of rich history that I like to incorporate in my practice, and also just sharing my experiences as a Black woman who is of Caribbean descent, who has traveled to different places, has moved from Florida to the Carolinas, dealing with that shift in culture. I just like to use that to inform what I'm doing.
I don't feel like it does. I had my work, and it's a funny story, featured at Basel, and just last or this year, a gentleman's telling me, like, I've seen it, but I didn't know you were Black. So it's like I was able to connect with your work without knowing your race or who you are or what you do. So I think that's my goal, is how to create bodies of work that are recognizable just to the emotion.
When I think about my identity, I think about a lot of overlaps. I think about being queer. I think about being from the South. I think about a lot of the ways that being raised as a boy child with interests and hobbies and ideas that aren't necessarily in alignment with that expectation causes a lot of otherness. Default, I'm very self-independent. Sometimes it has come from like a history of perfectionism, high expectations to perform. I think about the fact that all those overlappings create the unique experience and lens that I have. And I think all those things considered, my work is a direct reflection of those different overlaps.
So for me, my artwork is a direct reflection of me as a Black woman that informs my practice 110%. Sometimes I do abstract work, very, very rarely, but it's sort of like Justin says, regardless if it's representational, non-representational, it still is Black art nonetheless. But a lot of the work that I do talks about family narratives, talks about experiences of Black women and telling those stories. So for me, just growing up in the Black church definitely informs my work. Sort of dissecting that whole narrative of Christianity and like growing up, I seen all these images of like Jesus, and then growing up in this all Black church, it's like, wait, it's kind of not making a little bit of sense. So investigating that, but then also how faith plays a big part in my artwork. And then like talking to friends and family, I use them for like models, and then I sort of incorporate them into my work. So everybody that you see in my work are all people that I know personally. So for me, taking that experience of struggle, of pain, of joy, of triumph, and putting that in the work makes up my work. And I really feel like for me now, making work that revolves around like history, I have to get those stories from older people who've lived more than probably could ever imagine. And they have experiences of being Black women or Black men. And so telling their stories inside of the work, coupled with mine, is extremely important. So I try to figure out that fine line of like friend Zaire, daughter Zaire, granddaughter, and also artists, and figuring out how do I put their story in there while also staying true as an artist in my work. So I feel like my identity as an African American in the artwork has to be present, regardless if it's representational or non-representational. I feel like that is important for me to showcase who I am as a Black woman in my work, and for you to be able to see those images of Black women or of Black men in the work.
What was your creative process like when creating your work for this show?
So I decided to do digital prints, and I felt that kind of lent itself to better get across what I was trying to say in my work. The prints I've made, they're all collages of different images that are inherent to Black culture. And I think just like the process of collage really gets the point across of that there's different layers to Black people. And then also the images that I chose in each collage they really speak to that subject of that specific print.
What was my creative process like? Try to be brief. I think it represents challenging myself to be still, to validate rest, prioritize rest. When your mind is always going 100 miles per hour, sometimes it's also reflected in the body. And I think just as a culture, we don't put enough, or a people, in our experience, we don't put enough validation on rest. My practice is super meditative. When you think about embroidery, when you think about taking a wooden core and wrapping string around it methodically, it's intentional, it's fine-tuned, it's very detailed, and it allows for you to focus, for you to slow down, be a lot more mindful. So it's a therapeutic effect to my work.
For me, my creative process, so now I'm working in more of the quilting side of things. I'm doing a lot more quilts. So I think for me, the process of that was trying to figure out which images to choose from is always really hard. I have just thousands of family photos, so trying to find like that one perfect image to break down and make layers for the quilts probably was the hardest thing for me trying to find. Well, I think maybe trying to find the fabric that I wanted to choose, because looking at the photograph and then trying to pair it with the fabric to match is always super difficult for me, because I want it to flow together very well, and all of my work has different patterns in it. So it's sort of like dressing yourself in a way. You have to figure out which pattern works well together, and so I try to do that with my art. Like, does this plaid look okay with this polka dot? Does this color look good with that? So for me, trying to work through that whole process of choosing the colors and then sitting down and figuring out images as well, and also still trying to get a swing on things. Should I start with the colors first and then go find the image, or kind of what will I do with that? And also, the work has so many different layers. Like, the image that I choose from, maybe it has 10 layers or 11 or 12, so trying to find all of those specific fabrics to match that, or should I increase it to more layers? So trying to figure out the layer aspect of the work has been sort of a struggle in a way to try to figure that out, but I'm still learning that whole process of that.
I say my process is completely experimenting throughout the whole entire process. I might fall and trip, and there might be paint all over the place, but I'm going to take that paint and scoop it and utilize it for another piece. It's understanding like how actual process for future references is how it works. Understanding, okay, I can take chalkboard paint and actual house paint to create this background, and how is this going to take versus full pastel versus chalk. And understanding each individual medium is trying, I think, the hardest part. And coming up with a name, I think that's my hardest thing. Is like I'll do the piece and then I'll have like a bunch of untitled, but it's coming up with something that truly sticks with somebody, to be like, what made him, or what came up. Like, I was like, I know I spent like 3-4 days calling about that, trying to figure out.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not the easiest thing for me to come up with is a name. And it's interesting, but this process has taken me into the next chapter into my work. I want to create this series. It's titled The Handbook for the Recently Deceased. But it has everything to do with understanding where I'm at right now and where I'm going further, where my art's going to be, how it continues or weaken this legacy. If I'm here, what are the steps to creating a career, a self-sustaining career, and creating these different letters or chapters, and continue to write and understand more about the silence that I continues to sit, or that I sit with, and understanding what it takes to continue to create this movement that I'm trying to showcase.
So speaking of naming our pieces and attributing, significance through name, a lot of people, I'm sure, wonder, PS16, what is that about? So thinking about the history and legacy of education in terms of our community, the first HBCU in our country was Cheney University, established in 1834, first under the name the African Institute. It's had several names since then, but it was founded by a offering of $10,000 by philanthropist and abolitionist Richard Humphreys in Pennsylvania, in a community called Cheney in Pennsylvania. And back then, it was a lot of money. Right about now, we'll be looking at $305,000 when you think about, how much it would look like in today's time. But so Cheney University in that area in Pennsylvania, the area code is 610. So it's a nod, it's a homage, it's honoring this legacy of education. It was founded upon the principle of creating Black teachers to then instruct and educate newly freed Black Americans.
Well, the main goal for having our show in the Dalton Gallery here in Rock Hill was to expose the art community here to more of a modern take on artwork. And it's also kind of full circle for us, especially for me and Toye. because we both have ooh, a decade
Over a
long
decade.
tie to the Rock Hill community because we went to Winthrop. We, pretty sure for you, we've always wanted to have our work here in the gallery, especially as young art students at Winthrop. It's always like a goal to be featured in a gallery, especially coming out of college. So being able to come back a couple years later, not going to age us too well.
You said over a decade.
Okay,
No.
all right, over a decade later. And just having our work here is really special. And then also, I really wanted to bring together a group of friends that I have come to know and love, and really just give them the opportunity to show the work elsewhere other than, just in the bubble of the Charlotte community and kind of like expand outwards. And everything, like when you guys come and see the show, it all like flows together and it looks